Hi, Smart Community friends. I'm back with another bonus episode of the Smart Community Podcast, sharing various guest answers to the question, where to next for smart cities and communities? And this time I'm sharing with you the answers from these guests. John Carr from episode 241, Lior Steinberg from episode 242, Edwina Griffin from episode 238, Scott Shepard from episode 239, and finally, Felicity Furey from episode 240. Some themes that come through in the guest answers are around communication, community engagement, knowledge and information sharing, and better use of data and technology in our communities. We all want better connected communities, which begins with better communication, transparency through knowledge and information sharing, and using the data and technology available as enablers to allow communities to build those connections digitally and physically. It's important to understand the needs of the community, be able to translate solutions in a relatable way, and move forward in smart communities with co-creation and co-design. Opening up and facilitating conversations creates better solutions, better connections, and more inclusive communities everywhere. As John Carr says, the more we can demonstrate that engineers can take empirical data, do something with it, and then deliver it back in some way that is still empirical or palatable to the end consumer, that is how we can move forward. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the smart community, smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Where to next for smart communities?
Smart communities are, again, the ability to be able to verify empirical data. That's probably the key. The more we can demonstrate that we can take empirical data, do something with it, and then deliver it back in some way that's still empirical or palatable to the end consumer, that is how we move forward. And it's important that we bring other metrics into that. So like the concepts around sustainability. And again, sustainability has a lot of concepts. To take a concept, figure out a way to translate that into a data set that can be used before making your decision and then doing something with it. So, balancing out your designs with the most amount of data possible to make very complex decisions very easily by being able to understand what the touch points are and see the output of that change. So that's again, so not only verification of the empirical data, but actually using it effectively.
Yeah, the stories, the numbers, and then that feedback loop with the community. And I think what you're also talking about there, which we've talked about on the podcast quite a lot, is you're using a language that makes sense to the community, which I think is really key as well, because you and I can, throw these terms around because that's what we're used to. But the community doesn't understand those terms necessarily until we're using their language rather than some made up engineering language that we've come up with. Because if you're going to speak to somebody on their farm or in their terms, then you're going to be able to get through more easily. And if you, like you were just talking about communication with engineers, that's that translation piece that we sometimes are missing, and that is the narrative is missing, that we can actually do that. Because if you can't, then you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you can't communicate on a level that other people understand, then just forget about it.
Yeah, it's like you've spent a career building this wonderful skill set, training your mind to solve immense problems, and then you can't tell anybody about it because you're not able to communicate it correctly. And when it comes to interacting with communities and stakeholders, believe me, that's our problem. It is not their fault that they don't understand these concepts. They shouldn't have to. It is our job to make sure we can communicate it. And if we don't communicate it right, that's on us. And that's an important point for people to take away. We need to grow our ability to communicate and recognize that that's a part and parcel now of being an engineer.
Where to next for smart cities and communities?
Well, I think we need, we need more people like you who open up the discussion and talk about it. I think that we absolutely need to open up knowledge, right? So educate maybe is a bit top-down word, but basically share the knowledge that we have. I think that the biggest threat for our cities is if we just follow up marketing promises. And the only way to fight with that is to gather knowledge, gather evidence, and make it available to people. Just like smoking. I mean, there was a lot of marketing around the topic. People thought it's even safe. A lot of specialists got money to say that it's safe and that it relaxes you. But now we can just cannot ignore the evidence, right? So now it is just unacceptable to smoke in a restaurant because we all agree as a society that it's a bad thing. And I think in this way, smart cities is kind of the same. It's some sort of a promise that is given to us, and we urbanists who care about cities, we cannot just happen. We need to gather together and propose a different future. I mean, not just be against it, but propose a different future that is better. And this is what I'm seeing that happens. So in a way, I hope this is where smart cities are going. I don't know if it will happen, but I hope so.
Yeah, it's like pushing against the narrative, the original smart city, which was which was basically a marketing term that I think IBM came up with, and pushing back and going, well, actually, no, we understand, we know that technology can help us, but we were looking at what it can do for outcomes, and it's not necessarily that we are going to solve everything, or we won't solve everything with technology, but actually looking at those problems, those issues, and coming up with the solution without that lens with only thinking about technology. It's not like, oh, here's a bit of technology, how can I put this into my city? It's like, what are these issues that we're talking about? And also looking at those things that are good things, like you said earlier, and trying to elevate those. And what other tools and things do we have available to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And in this sense where we push back or we push against the narrative, I think we also need to call out cities who are doing it. We're not doing it enough. So take a city like Tel Aviv or Barcelona, are very proud cities in terms of smart. They call themselves the most smart cities in the world because there is a lot of sensors and technologies. But there are still tens of people dying every year in those cities from traffic accidents. How can you call yourself a smart city where people are just dying because of mobility? You're a stupid city as long as it happens. And I think that we just need to call out those cities who are using those prizes and commercials and marketing campaigns to brand themselves as smart while they are still being very much stupid. And I think we just need to call out those cities.
Where to next for smart communities?
Where to next? Well, I feel like it's just going to get better and better in terms of the potential. So I don't feel like I'm even qualified to answer that question, Zoe. Where to next for me, is, as I've mentioned, I think going into more of the machine learning and artificial intelligence. And there's probably a whole lot of stuff that I'm still going to learn about where to next, because this is the space I'm still learning. So I think as the systems, and one of the things that we are talking about actually at the moment that we are integrating, which is probably where to next for us, is SNOMED codes for Australian digital health that are used. And we're looking at integrating those into our app as well, which is then utilising our data that can be shared with medical sort of data, which then becomes useful for medical practitioners and professionals to go, okay, mental health of these regions and what do we need to look at? And then that's when it gets exciting as well. So I think the more all of those larger systems can talk to even the little guys, is you get some of that data that people aren't always wanting to talk about their mental health. And I think that's when it becomes useful, when you get all of the different systems talking to one another and getting data that wouldn't otherwise be revealed for a good intention, not revealing individuals again, but to be able to get the services out to the people that need it, particularly in the mental health space. To me, I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, in the regions, or, you can have a look at, okay, why is Toowoomba performing worse than Roma or whatever, for example? And yeah, again, like you said, not that individual level of then targeting specific people, but yeah, looking at from a regional level and making the resources available, making sure people know that they're available as well, I think is important. And I think just opening up the conversation too about mental health is so key. Like, I just think that if we can start talking about things in a way that's it's fun, it's not like not fun, fun's not the word. It's like this kind of tech space, right? But it's using that as a tool, right? And so then you're like, oh, okay, this isn't just, it's not this secret thing that I have to, and, you're not necessarily, and you can choose who you're going to tell about that because it's still a private conversation. But yeah, I think opening up and just being like, oh, I am using this to improve my mental health. It's physical fitness. It's just the same as mental fitness, which is, what one of my very good friends who works with children talks about. Like, if you said working with children, oh, how does Janie go, physical fitness? Oh, yeah, she can run, do this or whatever. But we don't have those same conversations about, oh, well, how's she doing, mental fitness. So, yeah, I think it's really important to kind of, start opening up that conversation and bringing in the tech side, bringing in all those different elements as well.
Yeah, right. I think it's normalizing it. It's and to me, that's my world. It's totally normal. And like you say, a lot of the companies, it's because VR is quite new, new to most companies I'm speaking to, and certainly new to a lot of the employees. There might be pockets that are doing stuff, but it does make it fun. It does make it fun, as you said. So the entry point can be, hey, try this out. It's kind of fun, and you should be doing this anyway, because we all need mental health management. We all need stress management. So this is part of what we're doing now. It's sort of, it needs to be a normalized conversations. And I think, certain parts of the world is still taboo, but I think the VR angle in some of the countries we are speaking to where it's taboo is a great way to enter, because it's kind of like, where you're going to learn new technology. And this is the way of the future. So that can be the entry point if it has to be, ideally I like to go in going, it's the anxiety, mental health conversation. But if not, let's go in on the other angle, whatever it takes to get it in and help people.
Yes, and I like that it's about the language, right? You're still getting the same outcome, which you know what that is. And so if you can shift and move your language to meet the audience, to meet, the people that you're trying to serve, then, yeah, you can actually achieve those outcomes. Whereas like we were talking about, circling back to, it's not about you and your ego and selling your product in this particular way. It's actually, well, how do I get that outcome for more and more people? Okay, well, I do need to shift my language in certain elements, in certain parts of the world, or even, certain contexts and that type of thing, which I think is a really key space in working in different communities, because they're not going to be the same.
Well, it's actually a really good point, because I'm currently talking to our Aboriginal women's group on the exact that and creating content that is their language, that is their culture, and that is about what they want in their form, and they don't call it meditation, and so it's been really interesting as well. So we're still working on that project.
And working with people as well. Like, it's actually co-design, co-creation is the buzzword, but actually it's meaningful. Like, you can't, it's like not doing it to them, but doing it with them and for them, and really working out what it is that they want and then building it together, rather than just be like, oh, you really need this, so please take it, whatever.
Absolutely. And it's a privilege to be given the opportunity to learn, what their culture is. And there's so much that we don't know still. So it's been a real privilege to talk with them, and hopefully we'll get somewhere with that. So that's another exciting space. And that's just a first space of a different culture and language. There may be others in the future, which is, again, where I go, wow, isn't this an exciting space to be in? Because it's new and everyone's willing to give it a shot, I think, because it's new tech. So thank you, technology, for giving me the opportunity to new markets.
Yes. No, it is really exciting. I'm so excited to follow along. So where to next for smart cities and communities?
So smart cities and communities, again, I think technology is going to be an enabler for these more sustainably driven, human-centric outcomes. I think government is going to take much more of an activist role in defining the outcomes of technology for multimodality, for urbanism and mobility. We're seeing it right now with the direct intervention of stimulus funding being proposed in multiple bills by the United States government, as well as multiple levels of legislation, the European Green New Deal here in Europe. So government is taking much more of an interventionist activist role in terms of stimulating the economy and utilizing sustainable development goals in mobility as a key outcome or policy goal where they can deliver these desired use cases. So where we're at now in 2021 is very different than our previous conversation in 2019. And for better or worse, this may or may not be as positive for many people listening to this podcast. But the reality is the public sector is taking much more of an active role now than it was 2 years ago on a global scale in urbanism, in development, as well as the technology sector. So I think that's the direction things are going.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in the smart cities and community space, if we can work together with our government, if we can trust our government, if we can do all those things, and different countries will have different, views and contexts on that, it can actually help drive the policy, the regulation, innovation that's necessary, but only if it's the approach is the multidisciplinary approach that needs to be and with the community.
And it has to be a public-private consortium. It has to be all stakeholders at the table. It cannot be a top-down approach where it's all government mandating specific policies and the private sector following along. But then it can't be completely laissez-faire and let the market run its course either. There has to be a blend and an equilibrium so that we can deliver the best outcomes in the future.
Where to next for smart cities and communities?
Where to next? Well, I think deeper connection. I think I love this idea that technology will make us more human. It's kind of like this. We've gone into, being obsessed with our phones and then going back into this kind of connected space. So I see stronger connections, more genuine connections, and people really thriving from that. I think, we've said connection a number of times today, but I think that's a really key part of what we're doing. And that inclusion and belonging is what I would love to see the next in smart communities.
Yeah, I think we definitely will see more if we work towards it, if that's what we're focusing on, if that's what we want, because it's becoming more and more apparent that we're not just, I guess, the wake up, work, die kind of life is not what people desire, and nor did they probably ever desire it. But it's how do we get more meaning and those human connections? And yes, we can use technology, but sometimes it's actually about turning off the technology and using it when we need to rather than all of the time. And I'm excited for that, because now that we're still most of, not everybody, but people that were able to work at home, some people are still at home, but then making them much more accessible potentially, which then leads to overwork, over blah, 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 blah. And we talk about the technology doing that to us, but actually they're tools, right? We can choose whether we have it on and off, but it's definitely a continued process and a behavior change and a mindset shift to be able to go, well, actually, this technology allows me to be more productive. Therefore, maybe I can buy back some leisure time and maybe I don't have to be online 24/7. Because for me, smart communities isn't just, being digitally connected. It's about being physically connected so you're able to get around and do the things you need to do and do the things you want and access the services, but also on a human level connected with your community, with people in your local area, but also the technology allows us to be globally connected as well. And those both two communities are of equal importance in our lives, which I think is also really key.
Absolutely. I think COVID really showed us a really positive light in that people really got to appreciate the challenges that people are facing every day. And we actually talked about them. Have you got kids at home, or have you got this, or what's your situation? I think it really opened up that dialogue, because we were invited into people's homes more. We were invited into people's communities. And so we got that experience. And I feel like it became more okay to talk about mental health and some of those challenges that we might not normally talk about. And people were open to share that, which I think is really amazing and a really exciting step forward.
I agree. And I've been having more and more conversations about mental health, which, signals to me that, it is becoming a topic that it's okay to talk about it. It's not a taboo, and that we all suffer at some point in our lives, or we know somebody that does. And so it's something that we should talk about more, so then we can open that dialogue for people that maybe didn't feel comfortable in the first instance, but then feel comfortable enough to not even necessarily share in that conversation, but maybe take that home and then work out what they're going to do from there. I just had a conversation earlier this morning, a podcast interview about combining meditation and VR, which is super exciting. But again, it's just opening up the conversation to mental health, because it brings this sexy new technology, but actually it's solving this fundamental problem, which I love.
Are you looking for an engaging speaker, MC or facilitator for your next big event? Then we've got you covered. Zoe is a go-to speaker, MC, and conversation facilitator with a difference. She's a master at simplifying the complex and making connections you might never see. Book Zoe for your next event. Email hello@mysmart.community or head over to her speaker page, www.mysmart.community/speaking.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes are available on our website, mysmart.community/podcast. If you have any questions for us or any of our guests, you can email hello@mysmart.community. You can also find us on the socials. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter @SmartComHQ. That's com with 2 M's. If you are enjoying the podcast, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we would love for you to leave us a rating and review at wherever you listen. This really helps us reach more ears and eyes, so thank you for your support. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.